Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for February 22, 2026. And today we are talking with Ambassador Dziunik Aghajanian. Ambassador Aghajanian, welcome to the Groong podcast.
Good evening.
Austrian Dziunik.
So we skipped our week in review last week. There's a lot of material, and let's see how much of it we can get to this week. Let's start with what has become kind of a daily fear for everyone, that we're going to wake up and we are going to hear that overnight the United States and or Israel have attacked Iran, because since the start of the year, the United States has been amassing an armada of ships, airplanes, and everything in the Middle East and the Indian Ocean to ramp up pressure on Iran. And as negotiations continue between the U.S. and Iran, Netanyahu was in the White House about 2 weeks ago, exactly 2 weeks ago, February 11, to ensure that if the talks did not yield results that were consistent with Israel's goals, then there would be attacks. They have set the bar very low for the negotiations. They say basically Iran cannot have any missile program, they cannot have any kind of nuclear enrichment, any kind of nuclear program. And allegedly, Netanyahu brought with him some new evidence that Iran is building ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. And this is something that Trump actually said in his State of the Union speech last night. Does this remind anybody about weapons of mass destruction? About 20 years ago, 25 years ago? Well, it did to me. Interestingly, while the signals from Washington and Israel point towards impatience and war, Iran's signals indicate a more hopeful, measured outcome for the ongoing talks. So, Ambassador, is war on Iran imminent? Where do the negotiations stand, and what are the red lines on both sides at present?
Well, my take on the situation is that we're going to see another attempt at actually deconstructing Iran. But I don't think it is going to happen within the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks' time. I think the US, together with Israel, is preparing the Iranian surrounding, the neighboring states, for an ultimate attack, according to their understanding, together with internal destabilization that would help them either justify their interference or at least help them put the Iranian political leadership in a very difficult situation that would force them to change the regime. What is happening at it, what is impeding the Western attempts, I call them Western attempts because it's a collective effort. Actually, I don't know whether it's Israel pushing US or US pushing Israel. I think they are playing a very smart game, showcasing their eagerness to actually be the only force and power in the Middle East and to change the political landscape in the Middle East. So I think what is happening is they are getting ready. The Armada is just a show of force. I don't think they are ready to attack, knowing well that the Iranian party has all the might to respond and to respond in a way that will be devastating both for the Israeli state and for the US image in the world as the only hegemon that it is attempting to play the role of. What I haven't listened to the full speech of President Trump yesterday. I just heard several pieces, but what I got is that we are, as you rightfully mentioned, we are pushed back some 25 years when they were showcasing some white powder in the Security Council, justifying their attack on Iraq, which the whole world and the UN inspectors were saying it's non-existent. As for the demands from both the US and Israeli side towards the Iranian leadership, I would state that their demands are have no legal base, because there is no international treaty that forbids any state to develop ballistic missiles. As for the nuclear weapons, Iran has showed and it has demonstrated that it has no wish or willingness to have a nuclear weapon, which Israeli state has, and the Israeli state has not even attempted to recognize officially, to accept it officially, and to become member of nuclear disarmament treaties. But Iran has never stated and has showed that it has no intention of developing the weapon. But nobody can forbid a state to have peaceful nuclear programs, which Iran wants and develops. So this is where the negotiation has to be. But President Trump's speech was actually stressing on the development of missiles and ballistic, especially ballistic missiles, as if for putting fear in the minds of the US residents that if we do not attack Iran, we will be the one that will be targeted. Iran has never started a war. Let's not forget that. Unlike Iran, Israel has recently even committed genocide against the people of Palestine in Gaza and continues its very aggressive policies and politics in the Middle East, which is against any idea of peace and any idea of reconciliation in the whole world and in the Middle East especially. So I think we are seeing a transition phase where there is preparation made by the Western countries, their intelligence groups and institutions to find the foothold in Iran so that they can start and be sure that their attempt will succeed. But I don't think they will succeed.
Ambassador, we've been saying US and Israel as if they're one indivisible group, but there are reports that Trump is differing a little bit from the US neocons and Israel in that he believes in some sort of a negotiated solution, or in his terms, a better deal is achievable, he says. What are the differences between the two camps, the US and Israel?
I don't believe that he is thinking about negotiations. I think it is just played out now to win time.
So do you think this is all theater?
This is all theater. I don't think that President Trump is a peace-minded person. I think he's just showcasing himself as a winner, and he doesn't want to find in a minute that he becomes a loser if they attack Iran without 100% guarantee that their attack will succeed. I think that he's dragging the time with the hope that he would get some justification for not attacking, but get some promises of probably involvement in the resource mining in the gas and oil resources of Iran, which I think the Iranian leadership has suggested as part of the deal. But I don't think that it's going to work like that. I think they are just preparing, and that's something that Israel is very eager to do, with the hope that eventually they will get to some kind of a regime change in Iran. I don't think they will succeed because the Iranian people are not supportive of the Western plans. Of course, the Iranian people want more liberties. Of course, they want better economic conditions, but they have never asked for becoming a satellite to the Western powers or to become a resource base for the exploitation of their economy and resources simply for hegemonic powers to keep their place in the world.
Yeah. Ambassador Aghajanian, so whenever people on alternative media are asked this question, everyone is very shy in trying to respond affirmatively. My question is about Turkey's potential involvement. Now, Turkey is playing the role of a peacemaker. They don't want any conflict. They don't want any war. But well, we know that Azerbaijan, for instance, has a very close relationship with Israel. In the June war, it has provided bases. It has acted as a military platform for Israel to attack Iran. We know that Turkey has a mutual security treaty with Azerbaijan, the so-called Shushi Declaration, which obligates or somehow, essentially makes it easy for both of them to get involved if there is a so-called aggression against one of them. And my argument is that even if you take the most easy to comprehend scenario, which is Iran retaliating against Azerbaijan for their support of Israel's war, for their involvement in Israel's war against Iran. If, let's say, Iran retaliates against Azerbaijan, is Turkey going to sit on the sideline? And people are just very afraid of making very bold statements. But just yesterday, all of the media, the so-called the legacy media, the traditional media, started reporting that Turkey indeed has plans to get involved, and the reason is to ensure the security of its people and also probably Turkic or Azeri people in Iran. Now, my question is, did everyone just wake up and realize that? Because um, I think that no scenario involving Iran could be accomplished without the second largest NATO army on Iran's borders. Turkey is the largest army in Europe, and even if it's like a controlled chaos, would that be possible without Turkey's involvement? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think in one of my interviews, if I'm not mistaken, I've stated that both Turkey and Azerbaijan have commitments towards West in deconstructing of Iran. And the way Artsakh was promised to Azerbaijan is part of that plan. So that was the bonus that was given to Azerbaijan in response to its possible involvement from the north in anti-Iranian actions. The same is with Turkey. We have seen Turkey playing this dualistic role, both in Syria, when it was playing a very good brother to Assad, and then we saw terrorist groups being prepared and trained and then entering Syria from the north, from Turkey's part. The same goes with this latest development. There were a lot of information that actually militarized several thousand people entered Iran from Turkey. And on the other side, we heard that the Turkish intelligence passed information about these groups to Iran. I think what happened is that they were forced to have this participation, but realizing that it's not succeeding, they decided to save their faces by passing the information to the Iranian government so that they would not be perceived by the Iranian leadership as an enemy. But we know that all these plans that have been charted by the Western minds, I would call them minds, they have Turkey as one of the crucial roles in those plans, both in the sense of having the training ground, having them part of the engagement, and also the platform. From there, the attacks have to be carried out. But in return, Turkey demanded that the support by the US to the Kurds be withdrawn. And we saw the developments that happened both in Syria and in also Iraq. We see a lot of anti-Kurdish actions being taken. Also, Turkey demands certain territories as a buffer zone, called buffer zone, but we know that wherever the Turkish military enters, it never withdraws, no matter whether it's their own sovereign territory or neighbors' territory. And the same goes with Iran. We have seen, I would say, absurd suggestions from the Turkish side, from suggesting that they would be the keepers of the enriched uranium from the Iranian side. I don't know who in their mind would agree to such a suggestion. And on the other hand, suggesting that they open up camps and a kind of buffer zone on the Iranian territory for the possible refugees to be kept in those areas. Excuse me, this is just occupation under some kind of a legal legal justification, but this is what is actually happening. Just to have your foot on the ground, and then you would expand it to further occupation, and we will see this pan-Turkic idea fulfilled with the participation of Turkey and Azerbaijan as one of the main actors in the Middle East. West has fed Turkey for decades for one simple reason. It has to become the scapegoat for further Israeli becoming the strongest power and the only power that will be the one that would tell all the other countries around it how to behave and what will be the rules of behavior. But it's not going to happen. I think there are too many in the region to have such ambitions, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. So in the past month, Armenian Foreign Minister Mirzoyan and just now, in the past few days, Defense Minister Suren Babikyan have visited Tehran for high-level meetings. Most of the statements that came out of them were about peace and friendship and, non-aggression, etc., neighborly relations, essentially. So it didn't tell me a whole lot. What's with the stream of high-level Armenians going to Tehran right now at this very critical juncture? First of all, are there any concerns about good relations between Armenia and Iran? What are they talking about?
Well, after the announcement of trip and the recent signing of the details by Mirzoyan in Washington about how this so-called trip will be managed, you might have followed the statements coming from the Iranian side that it's actually unacceptable for them to have any U.S. presence on the border. In either way. So I think these visits are planned to put some kind of we call it to put a soft pillow under the head, to calm the Iranian side and to withdraw their position against having the operation of TRIP under the U.S. control, and showing that Armenian government is not doing anything against the Iranian people or Iranian state, which is not correct. I think they are just playing against the time, and the Iranian side knows well that both Azerbaijani leadership and Armenian leadership are under full Western control, and they are just doing whatever these countries are telling them. It's just not the time yet to show their full faces and their full intentions.
Would you say that the trip has actually severely undermined trust on the part of Iran in Armenia?
Yes.
Well, that was a very short answer.
Especially details that are being presented to our public in a piecemeal manner, which is raising more concerns and more mistrust towards the whole plan. And especially when we see that whatever the Azerbaijani demands have been put forward, they are being fulfilled under some kind of a guise that is being presented as some economic benefit that we will actually have. But as a matter of fact, it will bring more debt and more dependence on the US from the Armenian side. So it's not what is being presented. It's actually the vice versa.
Did JD Vance's visit 2 weeks ago have anything to do with preparing Armenia and Azerbaijan for a potential war on Iran?
Definitely. And we heard that about 24 of airplanes, military cargo airplanes, have accompanied his visit, and many of them have landed in Azerbaijan. And the big question is for what reason and for what purpose. Also, this unmanned aircrafts that have been given for $11 million to Armenia are also raising a lot of suspicion on the intention of their use, because both according to our military experts, we have similar unmanned aircrafts that are being produced in Armenia under a very low cost in comparison to what has been presented, and also a simple fact that no unmanned aircraft that is produced by the US will be given to Armenian experts to operate.
You were talking about the drones, and those are, of course, the VBAT drones. Do you think that this has anything to do with Armenia's defense, or is there a different plan for these drones that are being sold to Armenia?
Well, of course, they have proven their ineffectiveness in the Ukrainian battlefield. But and according to our military experts, we have our own production of similar drones that are less costly and could have been produced with this $11 million in big quantities. Additionally, there is concern that whatever is produced by the US will not be given to Armenian military personnel for operation, given the mistrust toward their connection with the Russian military. So we will see either US or NATO officials operating that, which means we will have also additional military presence on the small soil, making Armenia the target for any kind of response in case attack or any kind of intelligence operation takes place from the Armenian soil towards Iran.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I feared. Dziunik, let me change the topic a little bit. As we know, parliamentary elections in Armenia will happen this year on June 7th. And a civil contract, Pashinyan's party, has been working tirelessly to quote unquote get ready long before actually the campaigning has begun. And not so much in strategizing, for instance, on how to run these elections, not so much in trying to poll the population, but actually trying to um, uh, dirty tricks, essentially. Whether it is every certain sort of legislative measure help tilt the scales in his favor or arresting the opposition. It seems like the Pashinyan team is very, very busy throwing everything it can at the opposition, at the Armenian people, in order to ensure a favorable outcome for for Pashinyan. Now, I want to try to summarize all the things that have been done on the legislative sphere. Not all of them, but some of them actually. So, first of all, Pashinyan has raised the bar for alliances. Previously, the bar was at 7%, the threshold was at 7% for small alliances and up to 10% for larger alliances. This and political parties will prefer to run as individual parties rather than alliances. And to me, that is helpful for Pashinyan because it'll be easier to dilute the vote that way. Now, they also have passed legislation in the past to nullify the results of an election by declaring emergency. And more recently, they were able to pass new laws that will disqualify monitoring organizations that they deem to be biased. So if there is a and I'm pretty sure they're not talking about Daniel Ioannisyan's organization. They're talking about
Definitely not.
yes. Now on the outright cheating side of things, they have the Central Election Commission is manned by a longtime employee of Pashinyan. A parade of Western leaders, including JD Vance and European leaders, is soon going to come to Armenia, all like, vouching for Pashinyan. We're not even talking about Turkey's and Azerbaijan's outright support. We're seeing the arrest of the opposition. I don't think there's a single serious opposition challenger to Pashinyan who is not in jail right now. Um, and more
Or involved
recently,
in any kind of a case.
yeah, and more recently, we even heard cases where any like company that benefits from the government, there was allegation in the media they would funnel that money to civil contract. So a lot of things are going on, and it seems like it's so fast that we're not even able to keep track of it. So I'm going to just ask a simple question. What else would you expect the Pashinyan team to do in this election cycle? Are there any specific concerns that you have?
Well, the European powers are part of this game being played in Armenia, and we have seen the same straight face in Moldova when they actually rigged the elections there. So the same is being planned for Armenia. What is happening is that despite all what you mentioned, people are waking up in Armenia, and the rating for the ruling party is going down on everyday basis because people understand the devastating effect of their re-election will bring to Armenia. It will be another augment, as we call, for the country with unprecedented consequences, making the country totally dependent on our enemies. So this is something that I think most of the people in Armenia understand, and even yesterday's, or it was today in the morning, announcement of the raise of the
Pensions,
pensions will not do favor to the ruling party because they have shown that they are lying all the time. They have cheated the people. They have cheated Armenians. They have justified defeat, and they have justified their treason, telling people that this is just for the favor of economic benefit, which people
yeah,
see nowhere in the visible distance. So what people will be seeing is more of repression, more of this kind of soft power tricks being played on them. And I think the Europeans are sending their support team to help the ruling party to play with the minds of Armenians in order to gain some support for the civil contract in the coming elections. But I think the train has gone already.
yeah,
It does not mean that the opposition has no job. It has to do a tremendous work in order to make the people, especially in the rural areas, understand the consequences of this kind of a friendly vote, when they vote for their uncle's or aunt's favorite party or member, and which results in this kind of devastating effects for the country. So we will see a very difficult period for Armenia, and it has already started. It has started a year ago already with the attacks on the church, which luckily did not go the way they wanted because the people understood that it is actually aimed at destroying the Armenian identity and any
yeah,
kind of defense capability for the people. And I hope that the rest of what we call Armenians' last mind, or the last thinking of Armenians, which is like awakening and a real understanding of the situation, will guide the people towards parties and towards groups that will be actually serving the interests of the Armenian state and the
mm,
Armenian people. You mentioned it correctly that they are trying to figure out how to neutralize the leading opposition figures and the leading opposition parties. But I think these parties understand the danger, and they are thinking also how to overcome these difficulties and not to make their job even harder than it is.
yeah. I think would not be exaggerating to say that these are going to be the most high stakes elections in Armenia's modern history. And you mentioned the opposition, but I wanna say that we can now see the outlines essentially of three large opposition
I think
alliances
it will be
forming.
four.
Yeah,
I think
but
it
let
will be
me
four. Yeah.
so let me tell you what I see. I see Strong Armenia, Samuel Karapetyan's alliance. Of course, that goes without saying. He he has a very high public rating. So and so far,
Hovik,
I'm
is
not
that a
sure if they're
party or an alliance?
They
Strong
have
Armenia is
registered as a
currently.
party.
I think that there's rumors in the media that they are still negotiating. I'm not sure if they will go the alliance route, but I think right now they are
I
just
think
a
what they will
party.
do, they
Uh,
will have certain other parties getting into their list without registering it as an
yeah,
alliance. So it will go as a party with the involvement of other members
independent,
from
yeah,
other
independent.
parties. Yes, independent, and so it will be mixed
Mhm.
composition.
Now,
Because as you rightfully mentioned, they have raised the bar, and in order not to endanger their passing and not to make it harder for them to actually participate in the elections, this is the formula that will be adopted by many of the participants.
okay, so that's number one. Number two is Hayastan Dashing in my mind, Robert Kocharian and the ARF, Dash Natsum Party. That seems to, right now at least, mostly rely on the ARF and Robert Kocharian, similar to, so very few changes, I think, in that makeup. And the
We will
last
see
one,
some other parties also, they have to, because it was an alliance with, I think it was,
the Dziunik Party,
yes, the Sunni party, but
Reborn Armenia, yeah, it
yeah,
was an
Reborn
alliance.
Armenia, but now they have to reformulate it again. So we will see how it will come up. But
Okay.
you're right, that's the second biggest.
The third one, we haven't talked much about it on this podcast, but everyone was waiting for more news to come out. Is of course Gagik Tsarukyan. He was the elephant in the room in terms of Armenian politics. Gagik Tsarukyan is now making announcements. Several smaller parties, such as Suren Surinyan's, I can think of
Might
Andanik
Hayastan.
Tevanyan's, Mother Armenia, Might Hayastan. So I think that Gagik Zarukan actually has a lot of potential as well in these elections. So that's three that I can think of. What do you think is the fourth one, in your opinion?
I think the fourth one is Tatoyan and Hanapetakan Party,
Okay.
Republican Party, which, well, at least Tatoyan has pronounced that he will participate in the elections, but the final outcome of this fourth wing, we will have to see. I think
Hmm.
we will have four big groups and some smaller ones that will be there. I think Hayakwe will also join Tatoyan. Well, and I think Tsarukyan came out as one of the poles in the political landscape, given the public opinion outcomes for the last year and a half, 2 years. And it is good that these political parties and groups are joining together to form big poles that will help guide the public opinion in the coming elections. And it will make the job for the civic contract harder. I
Yeah.
think what they were trying to push for the opposition is to come under one name, which would have made it easier for the civic contract to play their already past topics like past and present representations, black and white. Now they are
Yeah, the
taking out
formers, the corrupt
the
formers.
formers, yeah, the oligarchs, etc. And now they are trying to take out different topics from their chest and play around to see which one will stick to the public. But I think these topics are already expelled, and they have no reference or relevance for the
Yeah.
Armenian public in the country.
Yeah, I think it's good that you mentioned this because I think the key to these elections will be I mean, any small party that participates and doesn't clear the threshold, all those votes will be vaporized and they will go to civil contract.
Correct.
So
This the main and the difficult task for the opposition is to explain to the public that these elections are elections of to be or not to be for both the Armenian state and Armenian people. This is really an existential election, and we will see whether Armenian people are smart enough and grown enough to keep their country and to keep their state as sovereign state in its big world and in the international arena.
Yeah. Do you think there is, I have a conflict sometimes because seeing all the ways that Pashinyan is already rigging these elections. From one perspective, I don't want to convince myself or set the opinion that these elections are going to be rigged. There's nothing to do. I think it's very important for people to go to the elections or to vote. But it's a little bit disheartening to see all the things being done. But I have to ask, do you think in the end any of this will matter? Because seeing the stakes, it's not just about Armenia, it's about Iran, it's about the future of the Middle East, I think.
I think it's
So
about
Armenia
the
is just
future
like
of the
small
world.
change, right? Yeah. So given all of this, is any of this in the hands of the Armenians themselves? And how likely do you think it will be through elections to get rid of Pashinyan?
Well, they will do their utmost to rig the elections and to succeed in their re-election. But what matters is the vote of the Armenian people. So if they succeed in keeping the people in their homes and not coming out to vote, then they will be re-elected. If the people come out to the vote and cast a vote for the nationally oriented groups, then they will not succeed. And no matter how much they attempt at rigging the elections, it will not matter, because what legitimizes the outcome is the actual vote that is cast on the election day. So what they do and the explanation of what they do is also affecting the opinion in Armenia and making the people even more conscious of their vote and the effect of their vote on their future. So this is something that a very difficult job for opposition to pinpoint all these steps that are being taken that are illegal, that are against the constitution, that are interference in the internal affairs of Armenia, and to explain the Armenian voters why this is happening, what will be the result of their, I would call, indifference and inaction on the election day. And eventually the decision is on the Armenian people's side, not on the somebody sitting in Washington or somebody sitting in Brussels or even somebody sitting in Ankara.
Ambassador, you mentioned a moment ago that campaigning for these elections have actually started almost a year ago in the form of Pashinyan's attacks on the church. Unfortunately, those are continuing still. They haven't stopped. After slapping a travel ban on many bishops and archbishops, the Ministry of Pashinyan Justice indicted Catholicos II for...
do you mean Pashinyan's Ministry of Justice, Asbed?
Yeah, I think I had a moment of dyslexia there.
A slip of the tongue.
More of a Freudian slip, I would say. Anyway, the Catholicos of all Armenians was indicted, and it had to do with not reinstating the Arachnort, the Archbishop of Miasnazot, whom he had defrocked. And I think that the courts had suddenly come in and ruled that he must be reinstated. Of course, they have absolutely no jurisdiction about how the church assigns bishops and Arachnorts and leaders and such. So, but anyway, that whole thing basically ended up with a travel ban on the Catholicos, so he could not go to the bishop meeting in Austria. And finally, that meeting did happen about a week ago, and it yielded an important statement of support for the Catholicos and told the government to back off, basically. Notably, the primate of the Western Diocese of the United States, right here, Archbishop Hovnan was among the signatories as well. And what is notable about that is that he was also a signatory of the Pashinyan-led statement by the 10 renegade bishops.
He seems to be playing on two fields together at the same time.
Yeah, that's actually, let's start with that question. How do you explain with Hovnan Derderyan being a signatory of both sides of the issue?
I can't
That,
explain
that
his
wasn't actually my
actions, but
first question, but let's
yeah,
go ahead
I
with
can't
that.
explain his actions. I think we have to ask him for the explanation. But I think he realized that he's losing, and he has gone too far with these reformist probably ideas. And the Armenian people, either in Armenia or abroad, is definitely not supportive of this group, and they are being rightfully treated as traitors and as those that are playing a very devastating card in the hand of the prime minister. So I think he's just backed from his position in a much safer position to be, and in a waiting time to see what is happening. I'm happy that the bishop meeting took place, and I'm very happy for the statement that they have made. And I think the statement that they have made was in support of the Armenian church and its head. So it's the
Yeah.
church and the head, not simply the Catholicos, but both, and in very sharp criticism of the actions taken by the government of Armenia. What we have seen is that the government has definitely stepped over its jurisdiction. I have never heard of a secular person leading divine liturgy, or even so. The demand from the court is illegal. They shouldn't even have taken the case, because this is also illegal according to Armenian constitution. They cannot interfere in the church affairs and their decisions. And it's like somebody telling the Pope whether to defrock any cardinal or any clergy from the church, and then demand that this person be reinstated. It's just stupid. I'm sorry. It's not only illogical, but it's stupid. It's just trying to show that they are the only ones that can make decisions and tell everybody how to behave. But in case of the church, and in case of any religious organization, irrespective of what kind of a church or what kind of a religious organization it is simply illegal and goes against the Armenian legislation and international law. So they have not succeeded, as I said in the beginning. Luckily, Armenian people showed that this is totally unacceptable for the public. I would say it has even raised the rank and the rating of the Armenian church in the Armenian souls and minds much higher, which I'm happy to see. And even those that have thought themselves as being atheists have started to support the Armenian church, understanding well that it is part of Armenian identity, and no one has the right to stampede over these values and to try to change it according to their liking and according to demands coming from our enemy countries. So this is something that is happening. I would say we have passed this period. We will enter a relative calm until the elections. So the same goes with your Archbishop, that he will be waiting for the election results, and that will tell what will happen afterwards.
Yeah, actually, I did have a question whether you saw that there's a relative calm already since that meeting of the bishops, and things are changing a little bit. You might be right that things are waiting until after the elections, because certainly the
I think
reaction
knowing
of the
that it is,
Armenians worldwide has been very negative to these attacks on the
yes.
church.
Also, I think that the prime minister and the group following him have seen that it is hurting their ratings, so they will just step back a little bit and focus on other issues towards the election period. And if we're unlucky to have them re-elected, then we will see just the destruction of the church.
It's a very curious to me why he even started this whole thing. I mean, anyone with a basic booklet of the latest poll results in Armenia would say that this is a suicidal mission to go against the church, but I'm just curious why he even began this attack. But Pashinyan claims that his issue with the Catholicos Guardian II, is allegedly due to moral issues and then
There are no
administrative
moral
other
issues
failure.
there. There
Yeah,
are no moral issues there. We have seen the same attempt at changing the Catholicos in 2018 with this Nor Hastan Nor Hayrabat movement, New Armenian, New Catholicos movement, which did not succeed then. But Pashinyan thought probably that he has enough power over the law enforcement bodies to enforce the Catholicos to resign and then have his own puppet sitting there and acting according to his
yeah,
likings. Also, in 2023, they thought that they have broken the will of the Armenian people and they can go with the concessions with Azerbaijan, territorial concessions. But then the Sarpazan Baykar came out with Bagrat Sarpazan leading it. So this changed the whole understanding of the situation. And before they would go for additional concessions and election, and I think they were planning to have elections much earlier than it was supposed to happen. They decided to neutralize the opposition field from any possible leaders that would actually lead the public into throwing away this government. So that was the reason why we saw these attacks against the church. We saw actually together with Azerbaijan and Turkey different efforts to demonize the Armenian clergy, to demonize the church in order to justify the attack against the Armenian church. But the public did not buy it and understood the real reasons of these attacks and did not support these efforts. So this didn't succeed. As I said, luckily the Armenian people understood the reason. But what we would see now, given the fact that it is hurting the ratings of the ruling party, they would just take a pause and focus on other issues.
Ambassador, I'll wrap us up here for our topics today. Let me ask each of you if you have some thoughts that you would like to share with our audience. Hovik, do you want to go first today?
yeah. To be honest, I'm still flabbergasted from the announcements that came from St. Pölten in Austria, and I think we're not doing enough justice to how much of a U-turn this is in developments. I think that I was reading the announcement. One of the things that is sort of the minor nuances in that announcement was it called for these 8 erring clergy or 8 erring hierarchs to find their way and come back to the church. And so we know that, right, that there were 10 renegade clergy. If we remove Hovnan now, he's part of the right group. That leaves 9 renegade clergy. So the announcement, by mentioning 8, it explicitly recognizes the Catholicos' ability to defraud priests, and it implicitly recognizes that former Archbishop Georg Saroyan was right to be defrocked, and his name is now Armen Saroyan. Um, I'm just like sort of flabbergasted at the turn of events. That's all I can say.
Ambassador, something on your mind that you would like to share?
Sure. I think during the last several weeks, I have come across some materials on YouTube, and one of them was about the Armenian city called Armenopolis in Romania. I think it was an interesting, and the other one was on Lvov, how the Armenian community there organized their life and brought prosperity to these countries. They were like states within states. What struck me were the principles that they used in governing those cities. And there were several that I think is also very typical of Armenian thinking, true Armenian thinking, that is not under the current understanding of what they want for new Armenia to be based on. One was honesty, the other one was hardworking, third was education, and the fourth was justice. These are just principles that are in the mind and the blood of Armenians, and I think that those were the ones that have shown throughout the world with the Armenian community spread in different centuries that we have been really trusted with these characters and have been treated by other people as such. And whenever any Arab was telling that it's Armenian word, it would mean an unbreakable deal. And that no matter what happens, this contract or that deal had to be fulfilled. I think these principles, we have to bring them back into our society. This is something that the current government is trying to kill in us, to make us a society that is thinking about eating, drinking, and dancing, probably enjoying themselves, rather than creation that has been in the character of Armenian people. These are the principles that we have to think about and bring back, because these are very core principles for us that are sitting very deep in our minds. And this is what people were dreaming about in 2018 when they came out into the streets to change the government. Regretfully, they have been lied about and they have been stamped in very dangerous ways. But I think it's not killed, and it's very deep in our senses. We have to bring them back.
And on my part, I just want to inform that pensions in Armenia are going up. 10,000 drams for the lowest pensions and a little bit less for the higher ones. This is all happening on April 1st. This is not an April Fool's joke, but it is just in time for the Armenian elections. And Pashinyan's justification for it? 2025 economic growth exceeded our expectations, which provides us with opportunities.
You know what the funny thing is? They don't have the resources in the budget.
Yeah.
Well, they certainly haven't come through to do major infrastructures. I think there was some kind of a talk that there was an $800 million surplus in tax revenues, but they're not using it to actually finance any of the infrastructure they need for North-South Highway or anything like that. But they're giving pensions 3 months before elections. You decide where that priority is coming from. All right, I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you, Ambassador Aghajanian. We appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you very
much. Thank you, Dziunik.
That was our weekend review, and we're recording this on February 25, 2026. Sorry, we're a little late. We've been talking with Ambassador Dziunik Aghajanian. She has served Armenia through the ranks of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and most recently she was a diplomat as Armenia's ambassador to countries like the Netherlands, Malaysia, Indonesia. She received her education at Yerevan State University, Columbia University in New York, and Uppsala University in Sweden. There's all the information you want in our show notes at podcast@groong.org/episode number, and you can click on the links for the bios, etc., etc.
Let me just make another call for you to like, comment, share, and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Of course, now I have to add a new fifth thing you must do, which is hyping our podcast. That's a new thing in YouTube. If you're using the mobile app, you can hype 3 videos per week from a small channel, and I don't know how they define small, but definitely you should see Groong there. So if you're using the mobile app, make sure you hype us so that we get a little extra boost. Much appreciated. This is Hovik Manacharyan in the US currently.
And I'm Asbed in Los Angeles. We'll talk to you next week.